thanks again. Thanks for setting aside some time to chat. I'm actually uh, really excited to chat with you just because of my background. Working in marketing, my whole career. I come from the agency side here in Chicago. Worked for a couple different agencies. Some very very small, some very very large. Wide range of clients. So the digital marketing space is always been a space that I've sort of played in here and there. And I'd love for you just to kind of give like just the really quick overview of the ad village, the sort of the elevator pitch for what you're building.
Yeah, the Ad Village is an online community where we're trying to make the internet a more positive place for children, and we're doing that by disrupting advertisers. So basically, we're using the same tools that advertisers are using to, serve ads, but instead of trying to promote a product, try to commercialize childhood and things like that, we're really just trying to serve messages that are uplifting, positive, and to again just make the internet a more positive place for children.
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of makes sense looking at your background. So you've worked in digital marketing pretty much your whole career, right? That's sort of where you got your start? What were some of the companies you worked for, and what was kind of some of the stuff you worked on?
Yeah, I was working in Burlington, Vermont, where I went to college. Had an internship at an analytics firm my senior year, and that was probably 16 years ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always found, digital advertising and the tracking and all of that analytics optimization. I found that fascinating. And so that was a relatively small analytics firm that later got acquired by the next company that I was working at, dealer.com. So that is a company that works in the automotive vertical. Primarily, my focus was tier three, which in that industry, it's considered the car dealers. And then working with tier two and tier one, which are tier two is the regional brands. And then tier one is nationwide OEMs like Ford and Subaru, Chrysler, Stellantis, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so while there, primarily focused on SEO in the earlier days, and then moved into paid search, display advertising, and like real-time bidding. So that was great. I love at all the companies I've worked at, the people, the technology, those are the things that were really fascinating to me. At Dealer, I didn't necessarily, I'm not a car guy. I was more a tech nerd. So looking to kind of scratch that itch, I moved to another company that was founded by, one of the leaders at Dealer, really, really smart ad tech, martech guy. And he developed a mobile location data business. And so again, I thought the technology was fascinating, like using, cell phone data to draw insights and show value to advertisers that's otherwise hidden. That was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But again, didn't really fulfill me at the end of the day to be doing that. Back way before my professional career, I was a sailing instructor, taught swim lessons. And so working with kids has always just been kind of a passion.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's kind of where the two worlds collided of how can I use my digital marketing expertise for the better and, around children with families and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So background in digital marketing, ad tech, martech, and then, obviously kind of wanting to do something that, uh, supports kids or helps kids. That makes sense. Did you always have kind of an entrepreneurial kind of bug? I mean, did you always feel like you wanted to do something entrepreneurial? It's one of my favorite things to dig into with people who start companies is if it's something they always kind of felt, or if it happened later in their career. When did that kind of start for you?
Yeah. I mean, I was the kid with the lemonade stand yelling at cars driving by, back in the day. I was hawking newspapers when I was like 11 and 12 outside. I'm in New England, so outside the Dunkin' Donuts on weekends and stuff to get money to do fun stuff. But when I first started in my professional career after college, it didn't really dawn on me right away that, oh, I could do this, and, I definitely was interested in learning from others, eventually became a people leader and was a team lead, manager, director, senior director. So I loved engaging with people. And the first internship I had was a relatively small startup. The founder and all the people there were very smart and advanced at the time for what they were doing. And so that was a little bit intimidating because I was going in, learning about things in college, but then I'm now working with these experts that are just rolling off this cool technology and advancing things like it wasn't too problematic, that it was easy for them. Then moving on to a company that was massive. We got acquired for $1 billion one time. And then the company that acquired us got acquired for $4.5 billion. Working in such a massive company there, it was kind of hard to see out and say, oh, how could I establish something on my own? And then the last company, the mobile location data company that I was working with, that's where it kind of helped me hit the reset button with a new perspective and go, oh, I'm working with this guy who was at this massive company. He had big, media, big tech experience. He's now started this, other company here, from the ground up. And it was interesting to be part of kind of when the foundation of that built, that company was being established, and then watching it start to grow and going through those growth steps and needing to hire more people and working on acquiring more business and, outreach like that. That's where I started to see, oh, okay, I've been in these small businesses. I've seen the end of the rainbow there where, there's 40,000 employees involved. And then I was in a situation where I was in the middle there. It's really opened my eyes to, I think I could do this. If I have a good idea that I'm passionate about, actually care about it at the end of the day. I always cared about my team and my clients and moving things forward, but the missions weren't always there to be fulfilling. So, that's when I decided to step out of that role. It was really safe. It was comforting to know, like, hey, I've got a company that backs me, and if I'm having an off week, somebody else might be having an on week, and we can kind of be a good balancing act there. But eventually it's like, okay, no risk, no reward. And I definitely saw a gap in the market where there's a lot of really great companies out there that are doing great things to improve the lives of children, to protect them online, to make the world a better place for them. And I found this angle of, the ad village, which is relatively a new concept to add to that mix and help really supplement what all these other companies are doing.
Yeah. And before you landed on that idea that sort of became the ad village, the other question I like asking is, were there other sort of ideas you had for a company, a startup, an idea, a product? What were the ideas that you had that you maybe explored quickly and thought, oh, okay, there's maybe nothing there? Were there anything that you could think of that you worked on?
Yeah, originally I had so much experience and my network was really well built out in the digital marketing, especially the automotive vertical. I worked with some extremely intelligent, motivating people. Whether they reported to me, I reported to them, or we were just bumping elbows and working on projects together. And so that was kind of in the comfort zone, for all those reasons. But again, I when I was thinking about that, I was like, yeah, at the end of the day, other than the people, I didn't really care about moving the needle that direction. And actually at the mobile location business I was working at, a couple of us, including the founder there, we were all just kind of nerding out one day and just talking shop. And we were talking about, well, it would be really cool to be able to send custom messages out and, to build these. And we were talking about the tech behind it. And is that even technically possible? You have privacy concerns, you have just tech limitations and integrations you need to worry about. And at the end of the day, we were kind of talking, does that, politics wise, does it fit there? I didn't really care about persuading people that way. I that wasn't going to be fulfilling at the end of the day necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And so it dawned on me a couple of weeks later. I mean, I just kept texting everybody, and I was probably annoying everybody in our group chat. I'm like, yeah, well, we're here to work on a certain project, but I keep bringing up this other idea that I have, and I'm like, what I thought would be interesting is like, who would actually be interested in promoting messages with a certain agenda to a group? Who would actually pay for that? And that's where the idea of positive reinforcement, helping build positive mindsets with children, and parents and loved ones of those children, fueling those advertising budgets. That's where that concept kind of came together. And so building self-esteem is important, and I think that that's what we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
do with the
Yeah.
advertisements. But also blocking, just disrupting other advertisers, making it harder for those advertisers to get in front of children and persuade them and manipulate them, and all for the sake of profit. That's where the things really started to gel together, and the idea for the ad village came together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I think kind of hearing your story, I think the obvious assumption is that you might come up with an idea for some kind of a startup that's like in the automotive space, or like you said, related to one of the other companies you worked on. But um, I'm guessing probably the fortunate thing for you is like really landing on something that is very like mission driven, and something that you can be a little bit more passionate about. I mean, that's just huge, because I've sort of fallen into the trap a few times of either working with clients or getting involved with startups, just because it's like, oh, there's a great idea, there's an opportunity, there's a gap in the marketplace, and you can be passionate about like building a company and building a product, but after a while, I mean, it's like no matter what, it's going to be pretty exhausting, right? It's going to be pretty draining. So you need that extra sort of layer of the mission that you can really get behind. So it sounds like you found that, and I'm kind of curious, and you've talked about this a little bit already. What was kind of like the day one idea? Where were you kind of like, where were you at for like a starting point of mapping out what it was that you're going to build, or maybe it was just how you were going to go build it and accomplish it? What was that like early sort of brainstorming session look like where you started mapping it out?
Yeah, great question. I think the early date, the initial exhilarating thing was mirroring those ideas together and saying, oh, my ad tech background, my marketing tech background, my love for working with kids, in the sailing and swim lesson world there, with that all coming together, that was great. But then immediately, once it got into okay, well, how is this actually going to work? I knew that a lot of people I've worked with in the past, it would be like a cakewalk for them. They'd be, there's some people that were really motivating on the engineering and product side, who were, coming up with these great tools for our ad ops teams to use, and they made it look easy. We'd show up on a Monday morning in a massive company of thousands and thousands of people, and we'd have a new product that one of our head engineers just whipped up over the weekend and released.
Mm-hmm.
And even though sometimes people in the engineering department or the ad ops team were like, it's a little bit too easy for them to roll out that tech.
Yep.
So that was really the next phase is, okay, how can I start to build this? I'm bootstrapping. So, there's not a lot of extra funds to go around to pay for these experts that, that I used to work with. And so a lot of research started to kick in, where I was trying to think of creative ways to build the product by stitching together products that already existed. And so that's essentially what we're doing, is we're fighting fire with fire. We're using very similar or the exact same tools that these agencies and advertisers are using to get ads out there,
Mm-hmm.
but we're just repurposing it. And we're the best part about the project is serving the ads is really the goal.
Mm-hmm.
and that's where most of the value lies. Where my old hat that I have to wear serving the ad was just step one, and then getting them to commit to buy a vehicle or to do something afterwards and then prove it out to the client. That's where the real struggles were. So when it took me quite a while to just eventually stumble into all of the different tools that I'd need to build out the minimum viable product there.
Yeah. So a question for you, like building on that, like when you talk about the tools that you needed, and I'll say this first, like even though I've spent like my whole career in marketing, I've worked for agencies with, big media buying departments and big media creative departments and, big clients with big budgets. I was always more on the sort of account management side of things. So I kind of had like a hand in everything. So I worked mostly with the clients, worked with the strategy team, the creative team, the media team, all, pretty much everybody. So I never got to jump into the tech and jump into, all of the stuff that went into like a media buy and the and like you said, the technology and the tools that like make all that possible. So that's my caveat to this question. Is when you talk about the tools that were existing that you were able to use, like what does that look like exactly? What do you mean by that? And how were you kind of looking at those tools and how you could use them?
Yeah. So from a like product platform point of view, WordPress is what we're building off of, and bumping into all of those plugins out there can be completely overwhelming. There's a lot of competition there that a lot of them seem to do the same things, but then when you integrate with it, it falls short in some capacity. And so plugins were definitely a big part of it. We also are using just advertising tracking pixels and mechanisms like that the whole ad network and the whole online advertising ecosystem revolves around. So we're using those traditional methods there to allow us to recognize devices of people that are within our community, and then later target them with I do air quotes for this, with ads, because technically they're ads, but there is no commercial intent there. And yeah, that's been a big part of it. I mean, I've been trying to get more familiar with, doing a lot of research with vibe coding and things like that, because I'm not an engineer, at heart. But thankfully the tech that I need to use, it's for somebody that does that for full time, they could have done that, and rolled this product out much faster. So that's been part of the learning curve for me, is, just wearing so many hats, and trying to replicate some of the things that looked easy. Tools were provided to me to make rolling out, a launch of 1,000 campaigns something you could do in a day, in the old world. And then, trying to figure out how to replicate that on my side is kind of the new frontier that I'm working on.
Yeah. And I want to go back to kind of what you were talking about at the very beginning, with the mission of the company, and obviously the sort of a big umbrella statement is that you're, trying to protect kids against harmful, online advertising. And that could probably mean a lot of things. What are some of the kind of specific things that are out there that you are, trying to prevent kids from seeing or getting access to? And I'm sure there's like a bunch of really weird, dark stuff out there that probably happens, but the majority of the stuff, what does that look like? And also, this is coming from somebody with 2 little kids, and they're way too young to be spending any time on like computers or tablets or anything like that. But it's something I think about eventually. So like, what is the sort of some of the specifics of the stuff that you're, trying to kind of protect kids from?
Yeah, I think everybody originally thinks dark web, really, really terrible things when I say protecting children online.
Yeah.
That is part of it, where, there's a lot of apps that kids have access to that parents think, oh, it's like a block puzzle game. That's
Mm-hmm.
fun. But, you know, there's a high volume of porn ads that pop up there, and they're not targeting children.
Mm-hmm.
They just know that, they're real time bidding, they're machine learning.
Yeah.
Their systems are just noticing that when I can get cheap ad impressions out there, so I can serve these ads for very low cost, and when I do that on whatever this app is or whatever that app is, I get high engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the initial starting point, is where people assume that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But also, there's a lot of kind of horrific things that pop up that, parents don't really know about, where more recently some whistleblowers at Meta have said that, there were parts of their ad targeting algorithm that would match cosmetic companies. And, whether the cosmetic companies knew this was happening or not is kind of out, it's up, not known
Mm-hmm.
necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so if a 13-year-old girl takes a bunch of selfies and is deleting them, Meta would be using that to say, oh, this is a perfect indicator to serve ads to that person and share with
Oof.
them cosmetic ads.
Yeah.
Same for boys, right? Maybe it's, hey, they're taking selfies, and then we're going to start to serve them ads for the gym or for this protein mix that's not designed for kids' bodies. And that's really where the slippery slope starts to happen with how advertising is more than just, trying to block the kids from seeing that cool toy that they're going to then nag their parents about until they just finally give in and buy it,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that those are easy lead-ins when you say, porn ads in front of children, that's terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's this stuff happening here with cosmetics and other types of brands that's pretty slimy.
Mm-hmm.
And then just at the end of the day too, just commercializing childhood, trying to, they advertisers know that, brand loyalty, the lifetime, lifetime revenue that they can get from a customer, that adds up, and
Mm-hmm.
they know that children have a hard time understanding, and especially in ages younger than 10, they have a hard time differentiating between, is this fun content and the thing that I'm here for, like watching
Mm-hmm.
YouTube videos, whoever they're watching on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ads that are popping up, sometimes they're taking them as fact, and they can't really decipher between the two. So there's definitely a lot there to educate parents on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, again, those lead-ins with the obvious things are really the hooks. And then the more layers and the more subtle some of these strategies are, the more scary it gets, knowing that, your child has this device. Screen time, they know screen time's bad, they know that sexual predators are bad,
Mm-hmm.
porn, those are bad. But the lifelong impact that can happen to somebody who is having image issues, and then quickly thereafter start seeing ads about how beauty is going to make you more popular and everything,
Mm-hmm.
some of that, it's the damage is not going to be for the 30 seconds that video adds up, or for however long it's on the screen.
Yeah.
Some of that lingers for quite a long time. So even just disrupting some of those, making it more expensive for advertisers to get those messages in front of children, that's what we're trying to do, is build more of a digital moat, make it
Mm-hmm.
less attractive for advertisers to go after people in our community, and hopefully serve ads elsewhere to people that are of age and, not so vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense because I think the kind of obvious thing that probably most people think of is exactly what we talked about, like links to porn sites and places where they're chatting with God knows who, and stuff where there might be, I don't know, violence and stuff you don't want your kids looking at. So like that's the obvious stuff. But I think you're right. Like the stuff that is almost just as scary, just because of how easy it is for them to get it and how prevalent and how it's almost hard to even tell, like even when it's happening. is like all of the stuff that um, are it, like if they see this thing one time, doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But if it's over and over and over, and then even just keeping them, on their device longer than they should be, which is true for everybody, but especially young people, that's where I've had some conversations with founders, kind of exploring all of these dangers of social media, for example. And there's the obvious stuff, but then the not so obvious stuff is where kids can be doing like making physiological changes just because of what they're being exposed to, even though it might not even seem that harmless from the outside. So that totally makes sense that you would want a platform that addresses all of that, not just the obvious sort of scary headline stuff that people probably think of like when the internet first became a thing, basically.
Yeah, one of our goals is to just try to be in every nook and cranny of the internet as possible. And so that's why, being able to disrupt advertisers on websites and within apps, that's very important. Within social media channels, we're setting things up to continue to just add more layers there. So as new platforms come on that expose risk to these kids, we're looking for new pixels to be adding, so we can meet the children where they are when they're out online. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of a whack-a-mole thing because there's always new platforms coming up to research and all of that, and that's never going to stop. But I definitely think that that's one of the fun things too, is it's keeping it fresh. You can't just set it and forget it in this world.
Yeah, and being somewhat in digital marketing for a long time, I think the interesting thing was always all the different opportunities for like where you might be able to reach people with like really targeted digital ads. I mean, there's always new stuff. Like when video games first kind of got advanced enough where it's like you can have all of these like sort of like native advertisements like within games that don't even seem like ads, but they are ads. And even if you're playing the game, you maybe don't even realize it's happening. And that's just like one example. And so I'm sure in games and social media apps and all sorts of different, connected devices. I mean, I think you're right. The whack-a-mole analogy is perfect because it's got to be hard to keep up with, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of companies out there that are doing really great work. Where they're building hardware like specific phones that are designed for children. There's a handful of companies out there that are really strong in that field, doing great work. There's others that will allow you to buy a phone and then you layer software on top of it, so parents can block certain apps. They can see who's messaging their children on text, and they can approve certain phone numbers, and only phone numbers that we know about can contact you, call you, text you, and things like that. Safety features too, like the GPS of the phone, helping, and especially like smartwatches for families that don't even want to give their kid a phone, but they still want some contact with them and to know physically where they're located. That stuff's all very, very inspiring. And I get a lot of questions too about, what's my opinion on ad blockers? Because I think the first piece of education I usually have to do is telling people, well, we're not necessarily like an ad blocker. We're not trying to recognize where an ad is about to fire and then block that and stop the ad from actually serving. Technically, I don't know how to do that myself. And, that's a very difficult, talk about whack-a-mole, like the way that advertising monetizes on these platforms, they thrive off of advertising. So, I mean, lately YouTube's came out and said, hey, you used to be able to get away with ad blockers on YouTube, and they're really putting the hammer down. And that's probably in reaction to a lot of their paid search budgets getting their paid search revenue, from like Google search and stuff like that, dropping off the charts because now everybody's just kind of AI chat GPT in their way through searches and stuff like that. And so that's where the industry is really shifting right now, is, you know, the platforms that would rather have the ability to say, like, say YouTube, we have this many people watching your videos. Yeah, we'll kind of lose a little bit of revenue to ad blockers. They're really not being as flexible there. So, I mean, I do encourage parents, get the hardware, delay. I think delay giving your kids screens for as much as possible. Sounds
Yeah.
easy. I know in practice it's not. Adopt products and software that's going to help you monitor things from the really bad guys out there that are, sexual predators and things like that. And use ad blockers and, all of that. Those are great safety layers. And, when an advertiser pops up, they're kind of like a digital flasher. There's a trench coat. The kid's exposed to something. Hopefully it's harmless and it's just something they're going to nag the parents to go buy for, their birthday or something like that.
Yeah.
But that happens in real time and you don't know what's happening until, it's active.
Yeah.
One of my friends was telling me when I was kind of brainstorming, he's got a couple of young kids and he was like, "Oh, are you gonna be able to block audio ads?" And I was like, "That's for him to ask that, I was like, that's a very unique question from you, Doug." And he was like, "Well, because my daughter and I, we use my tablet, so it's the adult's tablet. The daughter knows that podcasts can come through there, and he listens to his own podcast, true crime stuff. They build a profile off of him. They know that he's a 30-something-year-old in New Hampshire. And then when him and his daughter are sitting there listening to like a kid's podcast together, the algorithm doesn't necessarily know that. And he's like horrified every time he knows an ad's coming up because he's like, oh, I really hope it's not one that's like very adult targeted towards me because my daughter's exposed to it and he can't put earmuffs on her, quick enough to block that message from getting to her. And it makes it for some really, awkward scenarios, he said sometimes. So
I can imagine. I think more times than not, if I have my kids, they're 5 and 3. So if sometimes I'll open my phone and I had YouTube on and I was watching some video podcast and it's kind of the same thing where you like a very momentary thing. They see it, they hear it, then they ask questions, and like once or twice you can brush it off and say, "Oh no, that's just like a show that Daddy watches." But you can imagine if that's happening over and over, and with a variety of different things, like it must have an impact. Because I'm very interested in all of these topics because growing up in the 80s and mostly 90s for me, like when I was like a little kid, like I feel very fortunate. Like I think I grew up, and we're probably about the same age, like growing up, really a lot of my childhood before cell phones, definitely before the internet. We kind of got to experience both sides of it. And it's just kind of crazy how kids are just exposed to so much technology, the good and the bad. And obviously you're building a lot of great stuff to like help with some of the bad. Have you heard from like parents when you're kind of like doing research early on? Any kind of like insightful things like that audio thing is what made me think of that. Like what were some of the common like pieces of feedback you got, or questions or concerns? And then was there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, I think originally I went into it with the angle of protecting kids from advertisers. And the idea was, even if I just served an ad that was a black box and it had no message in it, that's better than a child seeing an ad with whatever kind of commercial message that they're trying to get the kid to bite into. And then that kind of falls short on how much value and how much progress can be made there, where the idea of you could be serving ads of positive messages, and kind of going back to what I was saying earlier when when I was originally brainstorming this with some other colleagues of mine and going, well, politics, is that work? It's like, no, I don't really care about that. I think that's the most fascinating part, is when people come up with ideas for what can I show these children that is going to help them and not just protect them from the advertiser and disrupt them from being manipulated like that, but to do something even better. And so I was speaking to a nonprofit, and they have specific agendas where they're working with very, very low income, below the poverty line families. They're doing amazing work there, and they had an idea of, hey, so like we know that our families that we work with, if they have kids in say like the 2 to 5 age range. They're probably going to skewer me on that because I don't think that's the exact age range that they referenced. But they're like, in this age range, teaching kids just basic things about being a good human, like sharing. They're like, sharing is really important to learn at this age. And so, matching up with professionals that have more background in childhood development is really the eye-opening piece. And I think parents, that are really engaged with their kids too, it's really eye-opening there, where they come out of left field with some ideas I never would have thought of, and they're amazing. I'm going, well, how could I have forgotten, kind of the Mr. Rogers Sesame Street side of my upbringing of, oh, right, I didn't just learn how to have empathy, that's a skill that you have to kind of build. And I didn't necessarily go into it with that. So I think that's where a lot of opportunity lives, is getting creative with, what do we do once we win that ad auction? I have to serve something. I have to serve some sort of air quote ad there. And how can we make that as meaningful as possible?
Yeah, that's a very interesting just idea to just think about and imagine, like if sort of corporate-y kind of advertisements or commercial advertisements of some kind, or just sort of like a special filter that if it's a kid, it just gets replaced with like sort of a PSA type advertisement that even thinking back to, when we were kids, like you're right, the shows that we watched always had lots of like lessons and positivity and teaching moments constantly. Now, granted, we also had like all the 30-second ads in between for like juice boxes and sugar cereals, but still, that the really great messaging was central, right, to what we had. And I'm sure maybe some of the kid stuff today still is, but that's like a super interesting idea. It almost seems like a magic trick of like, oh, instead of an ad, a kid's going to see something really positive that may teach them something. That's a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're showing up to the ad auctions where all the other advertisers are. I think we have a deeper interest in in getting these ads in front of the kids, and then part of the ad village and that digital moat is really trying to make it less lucrative for the advertisers to target people within the community. So they're all looking to serve the ads for the cheapest amount of money possible. They want to get the highest click-through rates and, and see that return on ad spend and all that, mumbo jumbo there. And, it's kind of like when a lamb has been separated from the herd, right? It's easier for the wolves to target them when they're off on their own. And so that's kind of the concept of why we call it the ad village. Is it's a community. There's different neighborhoods, whether that could be age groups, which we don't have those subsets just yet. We kind of need to get a bigger volume of people involved before you can start to do that. But even leaning into concepts of like, oh, are your kids more sporty? Are they more into reading books and things like that? And, kind of having our characters and the ads resonate with them that way and kind of matching them and their interests. Because if, that lamb comes back into the herd, these advertisers that are the wolves, they're going to go, okay, well, that's a little bit too protected there. That's a little bit too expensive. I'm going to go look for somebody that's off over here. That's an easier target to get. And so that's where like strength in numbers, in the online world kind of comes into play there.
Yeah. And that's cool. And obviously the name makes a lot more sense hearing a bit of that context. Not just the how it works today, but kind of where you kind of plan to take it. Like that makes total sense. If a parent today was just like interested in this, and they wanted to know how does it work, not necessarily behind the scenes, but just for them, what does the process look like for them to start doing stuff like this? I mean, it's still pretty early, right? I mean, you have launched a fit. Like, was there like an official launch that you had for this, or has it been kind of phases? How has that kind of worked so far?
Yeah, it's been in phases. The initial was just kind of shifting from previous, my previous position at another company into
Hmm.
just doing this full time. For a while, I was staying up late each night after work, trying to, force myself into finding energy to
Hmm.
do the research and build it.
Yeah.
So we've moved on from there, have a minimum viable product out there right now,
Yeah.
where, members can sign up. They can access portions of our website that allow us to enable these advertising trackers.
Hmm.
So the parents are opting in. And so really it's in the phase of trying to build out that community right now, intentionally. I've been just socializing and really talking to friends and family, to get preliminary feedback and to work out some of the kinks there. But what I'm really excited about is some of these pending partnerships that I have. Can't really mention, none of the ink's dry yet.
Hmm.
But there's so many players in this space that are doing amazing things, and they have parents' attention already. And so, building out the volume of the community is the next exciting phase, because that's where, like say on YouTube, you need to have a minimum of 1,000 devices or people, essentially, um, to be able to serve ads to a custom audience.
Hmm.
So in order to be able to share with your friends and your brothers and sisters and kids at school, and this is how you share, you need to have a subset of a group that is large enough to actually target there. And so that's kind of the new major target I'm working on, is partnering up with these other companies that have families that are already interested in this stuff, already kind of know uh, some of the dangers, and then introducing the benefits of being a little bit more proactive in managing the ads that your children are seeing online.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I've talked to a handful of different companies that are in kind of a similar stage, that are like still kind of early, and more so running like kind of pilot programs and just getting to a threshold of like, okay, once we like get this many users, then it'll be sort of a little bit more test and learn and really understand, version one of the product, before obviously, like, you sometimes the worst thing you can do is just go out and just get way too many people using it all at once, and then you have a hard time kind of really understanding what's working, what's not working. Is it the right audience? Is sometimes you don't even know if it's a bunch of people, if it really is the target, that you're trying to reach. So, how are you kind of looking at that in terms of, right now you said it's a lot of friends, family, people and then through these partnerships, probably a fair amount of kind of user traffic. But kind of what are you looking at right now as kind of your immediate, most immediate goal, I'll say?
My most immediate goal is to, that's a great question. I mean, the most immediate goal I would say is really trying to forge these relations. I think the nice part about introducing the ad village to people through like LinkedIn message, cold email, cold LinkedIn messages. I was just at an
Yeah.
ed tech networking event. Is people that are already living and breathing in this space, they seem to be really great. So really nice people, very engaged. They have similar missions. They're just taking a different angle on it.
Hmm.
And so I think that's kind of the next step, is to really find good ways to integrate with other platforms.
Hmm.
And so one thing that we have now, which is pretty popular, that most of the other orgs that I'm talking to are excited about, is like an affiliate program, where it's more about blasting out messages to their existing customers and to their networks, that the ad village exists. And then, there's like a commission, a percentage that for each sign up that we get through them.
Mm-hmm.
they're financially incentivized to help promote us there.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be going pretty smooth in conversations. Um, Other things that are really exciting too is, kind of Department of Education and budgets at the state and federal level right now are a little bit up in the air. People aren't really confident in knowing about where that's going. But I think that there's a huge play with integrating with schools and platforms like that. So what the Ad Village is built for right now, if you were to visit the site, it's more for a family to sign up,
Mm-hmm.
protect the children within their household. But there's so many other places where kids are being bombarded with ads and are at risk of all of these other negative things online,
Mm-hmm.
especially through school provided devices, whether they're taking it home or they're in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Kids have a laptop in front of them. They should be paying attention, but that they're
Yeah.
watching YouTube videos on mute or with a little Bluetooth headphone in their ear and things like that. Um, so that's, I think, school districts and getting embedded more with people that are working with Congress and all of that. That's really exciting, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a little bit more of a cruise ship. It's a
Mm-hmm.
big object. It's great to get on board with that, but to turn that cruise ship around, it takes a lot of time and planning.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're planting those seeds early right now in hopes that, as that moves on and time goes by, we'll be in a good position to really help schools in that
Mm-hmm.
manner as well.
Yeah. Um, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you've like bumped into, whether it's the finding the right message for the different audiences or just reaching the different audiences, whether it's parents, schools, nonprofits, other, potential partners? What are some of the things that you have kind of bumped into that have been, a challenge, something you had to kind of overcome?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is kind of um, shifting categories. I have tons of people that I know that are building really great businesses, startups, or they still work at big agencies and stuff like that. And automotive vertical, out of home, digital out of home advertising, things like that. And so not having relationships already that are in this ed tech, parent tech, fam tech kind of space. That's been a challenge there. Um, but people that I'm friends with are connected with other people on LinkedIn. That gives you a little bit of credibility when you're just cold, LinkedIn messaging people and sending emails and things like that. So yeah, other than just having like a solid Rolodex, just rip through and get these, schedules the calls all scheduled. Um, I think that's quite challenging. But I think the nice part on my side is I'm used to more cutthroat industries where nobody wants, more or less, yeah, automotive vertical. It's really hard to get car dealers or OEMs if you don't have a relationship with them. It's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to get them to even read the subject line of your email, let alone actively engage with you.
Mm-hmm.
But leading into the conversations, not trying to sound too salesy because I
Mm-hmm.
actually kind of hate sales. It's uncomfortable for me, but I know
Yeah.
it's part of the game. I think that leading with, hey, you're trying to improve the lives of children. I'm trying to improve the lives of children. We have
Mm-hmm.
missions that pretty much end up at the same spot, but our paths to get there are completely unique. I think that that's been pretty helpful for me is, at least getting people to say, okay, well, I want to learn more. Send me an email or,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe I'm not ready for, half hour on my calendar with you right now, but let me check out your website or like listen to this audio clip
Mm-hmm.
and learn a little bit more. So at least when I get no, I don't have the time or we're not focusing on that right now, it's always a positive thing of like, hey, when, maybe once our product is a little bit more established, talking to a lot of other founders that are in this like build phase too, they're like, hey, we're kind of focusing on our main thing here. I
Mm-hmm.
can't blame them for that, but at least everybody's like, hey, wishing you the best. I hope that in 3 to 6 months from now, my startup's going to be in a position to partner with yours and really, 1+1 = 3, really work together and find, hate using the word synergy, but that synergy between the companies. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, based on something you just said a minute ago, something that I think we probably have in common is I am not a big fan of selling. And when I kind of went out on my own and was doing like independent, consulting work and freelance work and kind of building my own thing, the sales part is the part I by far hated the most. Because you can, at least from my experience, like you can believe in what you're doing and selling and be confident that you are like selling to the right person and you have the right message and it's like that the value is there, but there's just something about sales that I always felt was like just I don't know, like just kind of icky. Like I felt like I'm just bugging people, even though again I believe in it. Now it definitely helps if that kind of shared mission is there, and I've talked about this a bunch with people that I know. If that shared mission is there, it doesn't even feel as bad because it's like you jump 2 steps ahead and you're like, hey, listen, like we have the same mission, so now it feels more like a partnership maybe than it is selling something. So this is my very long winding road to get to my question. What are some of the things that you do to kind of help you navigate that, help you get better at it, help you get more comfortable with it? Because sales is a big part of starting any kind of a company, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that I do is I just block time to intentionally try to do cold outreach and not have the expectation like, these people don't owe me anything. So even if they just read, my message and they never respond, I feel like that's progress. So I'm trying to take a more positive mindset that failure to earn revenue and, keep the lights on at the business, failure to do that is not necessarily 100% failure. And if you're not knocking on a door, the door is not going to open. So, kind of just getting used to being told no, is getting tougher skin there, is kind of a big part of it. Previous roles, I, was always a supporting member. Sales guys and gals would, for some reason, they'd love to drag me on the phone calls before that sale was complete. And they're like, here's my guy, Mike. He's going to blow your mind on all this stuff. And, I was helping close them. And, that's part of being a good team member. I didn't like it. I was going on those calls because I knew it was good for my, colleagues and for the company and everything. But yeah, I think that's really focusing on this is time where I'm just looking for names to pop up that I can send LinkedIn requests to. Hey, I'm bootstrapping, so every penny matters. So, hey, if I can send them a LinkedIn request, they accept my invite, then I can send them a message, and you're not having to pay for all of these ways to get your message just blasted in front of people. And so it's been very organic that way. And yeah, I think sometimes also doing some like personal reflection of, okay, well, if I'm anxious right now, I'm getting a little depressed because nobody's responding. Your imagination is a really powerful thing, and sometimes it can run wild in a negative direction. So a lot of, thinking about how am I making things harder for myself? How can I actually control, my emotions more, my thoughts more? One example of that is I was talking to a company. I'm, really excited about working with them. They were really excited. I was talking to their CEO who had all these connections, and first couple calls went great. Had a follow-up call scheduled, and the last minute it kind of just evaporated from the calendar and was like, hey, something came up, I'm busy. Okay. Getting bumped the day of usually isn't a good sign, because they're saying, well, I've got something else that's a bigger priority than the half hour I was scheduled to talk to you. So I'm sitting there going, oh man, this isn't good. This isn't good. And then come to find out, the next day I see on LinkedIn that they actually got invited to the White House and they were in the Rose Garden and they were at this big announcement. And, like there was, these really, really high ranking people, like the president was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going, okay,
Makes
don't,
sense now.
yeah, I don't feel so bad now. Like I would have postponed our call and it got rescheduled, but in that 8 to 12 hour window of it getting canceled and me not really knowing why,
Mm-hmm.
I was my worst enemy at that point. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, being able to recognize when I'm being my own enemy is a good skill that I'm
Yeah.
getting better at it, but I'm still, it's easy for your mind to go
Yeah.
down the negative path sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, as a founder and like a marketing guy who is an introvert, like the selling part is like not great. And there's been so many times where I've had the same thing where I'm like, oh, I'm just being ghosted, or oh, they're not responding because they, don't really care about, the first call we had, or whatever dumb thing my brain fills in the blanks with, and then you do that really direct outreach of like, hey, like totally understand if you're not interested, but just like a very direct thing, and then they kind of respond right away, like, oh, sorry, we just
Yeah.
had a big round of layoffs and we're trying to figure out what to do, and I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like, let's chat when you're ready. And so, yeah, it's like, so, and again, that's maybe just more like getting in more in those reps and doing more of it and getting more comfortable with it, and it's just yeah, part of the process. Um, Uh, but the kind of the segue from that though is like doing kind of the sales aspect of everything, and I mean that's like connecting with people and cold calls and cold emails and grinding and getting in front of the right people and getting conversations going. Like that's obviously something you always have to be doing. But then on the other side of it, are there kind of marketing things that you've done or started to invest in? Probably not dollars, but just like investing in terms of your time, content marketing, or sort of figuring out ways of just kind of reaching people more organically, some of the slower ways of kind of building an audience and some like awareness around some of the stuff you're doing. Like, what are some of the things have you tried? Have you seen things that sort of seem to work pretty well? Knowing that probably all of that has to kind of work alongside the real, grind of like sales and get stuff going quickly. What are some of the other things you've tried to do?
Yeah, I think really, and I'm on the same page with you. Like it's easy for me to go into a corner and build things and neglect to tell anybody about it that could ever use it, and kind of look outside my comfort zone there. So that's something I've been trying to focus on as well, as recognizing, okay, what am I comfortable with? Okay, am I good at that or bad at that is kind of a different conversation. What am I not comfortable with? And I think the using resources that are already available, like going, and it kind of goes into the cold email and like salesy piece. I've been really inspired by networking with others in the community that are physically near me and also, pretty distant as well. So like one conference I went to, I'm in Southern Maine and I'm outside of the city of Portland. And so, nobody in the town that I'm living in is building ad tech like this. And so it's easy for me to just assume, oh, it's not, Maine's not really happening for this stuff. But I went to a conference in Portland. It was called Startup Maine. Just mind blowing about how wrong I was. There's people in even more rural and remote parts of the state that are building really fascinating technology, whether it's, writing code and, kind of using AI and things like that, to people that are taking kelp and processing kelp to make plastic products. Yeah, or kind of reinvigorating the forestry industry here. Like there used to be a huge industry here. Now there's some companies coming in that are using state incentives to bring that back and to make like packaging that's made off of like wood pulp and wood fibers and things that are a little bit more sustainable than plastic. And so, going to events like a 3-day conference, that's been great. That helped me find other organizations as well. So, famtech.org, they're awesome. Really, I was surprised to see the Anna from Famtech. She actually is in Portland, and I was like, okay, I'm even more wrong again. Like, I'm glad to know that I'm wrong about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then even yesterday, Famtech, national, international grouping there. The startup Maine, of course, is focused on Maine. Businesses from all different verticals there, but it was still inspiring to be near them and learn from them in the conference space there. Last night, there was an EdTech meetup that was at a brewery in Portland. And so I don't really consider the Ad Village EdTech. We're more complementary to, people that are working in that space.
Mm-hmm.
It's more parent tech, fam tech is what we're doing. But I went into that not knowing, I saw it pop up a couple of days before the event. I was like, I'm not sure if there's really going to be anybody showing up to this. And then, I got there and there were like 30 different people that all showed up at for a couple hours. And that was really inspiring too, because, again, the imagination runs wild just because I don't know that there's ed tech,
Mm-hmm.
people within arm's reach, just
Mm-hmm.
within an hour, half hour drive of me, doesn't mean that it's not out there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've been using things like that to really help kind of get me out of this office here,
Mm-hmm.
to get, networking with the right people and, get inspired, from learning from others, even if they're doing something that's completely,
Yeah.
uh, has no overlap really, or not a direct overlap with what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just using those opportunities, because I almost talked myself out of, is it worth, driving 45 minutes each way?
Yeah.
Is it, I don't, is it, it's at a brewery. Like, I don't really drink. Like, am I going to
Mm-hmm.
be, is it
Yeah.
going to be awkward there? And it's going to be two people and, things like that. So
Yeah.
I could be my own worst enemy sometimes.
Yeah. No, I have that all the time where I think about, okay, am I going to this conference? Am I even sometimes a networking thing with like a single person? Because you look at something at face value and you go, all right, I'm not sure if that is the perfect use of my time, or if if there's going to be any value there, or sometimes if I can't provide value to the other person or to the place that I'm going, because you don't want to just take. You want to also give, and that's when it works out best. So you can kind of again psych yourself out, and there's been so many times for me at least where I've done the networking meet up for coffee. I've gone to the conference. I've agreed to speak at some small event and give like a presentation. The funny story that I love sharing is that I got invited where somebody was like, "Hey, can you give that presentation you gave?" Because they heard me give like a small presentation at like a startup incubator here in Chicago, and like, "Hey, can you give that presentation? We want to do this like online webinar thing for members." And I showed up. And it was set up so I was the speaker. I couldn't really tell who was attending or how many people. Gave the 35, 40-minute talk, and at the end of it, I was like, "Oh, hopefully that it was okay. Did you guys think it went okay?" I was like, "How many people ended up showing up?" And they were like, "Well, actually, nobody showed up.
Oh.
It was just us. It was like the four people who put on the event." And of course, I got a laugh about it. But the whole point that I always tell that story is that I sort of help them understand, like, that's actually not a big deal because we recorded it and now you guys have this great content. I have the content too, and I can use it and repurpose it and share it out, and you can still share it with your members. And they ended up getting a handful of members who consumed it and watched it and followed up, and then there was like some good engagement from it. So anyways, you can always look at that stuff at face value and go, that's maybe not the best use of time, or that was a waste of time. But when you're building something and you want to be seen and visible, and you want to be kind of seen as an expert and somebody who's a connector, all of those things. I put all that under the umbrella of just content marketing, is like doing all the stuff, but then also, somewhat of a amount of attention to like kind of documenting it and seeing how much you can, squeeze in terms of value that you get or value that you can kind of give up to other people. So it sounds like maybe some of that stuff you're seeing that as well with different things that you're doing and how you're spending time.
Yeah, it's kind of like planting seeds. Like you don't have a vegetable garden at the end of the season unless you try.
Yeah.
You don't catch any fish unless you go fishing. And yeah, sometimes my outreach to others, they're like, yeah, I don't really see me being able to help you. This actually just happened a couple of days ago. I was asking somebody who has like a parenting sports podcast. I was like, hey, I think that's fascinating. And they're like, well, why are you reaching out to me? I said, well, you have parents that you're talking to about sports, and if they care about their kids, those are the parents I'm looking for. So it's the same audience, and it kind of turned into he's like, I don't really think I'd be comfortable promoting you and doing this affiliate thing. He's like, but we have a lot of questions internally, with me and my stakeholders about advertising. And he's like, I know you said you got a bunch of advertising background. Would you mind like hopping on a call and just like spitballing ideas? And so, it turned into from me asking for something to them asking me for something. And, that's booked in a couple of weeks. I love to help people out and nerd out about, all this tech stuff. And who knows, like I have no expectations of that maturing beyond that, but you never know, and so I've heard a lot of folks that say, hey, anytime somebody asks for a call, take it. If have a coffee with them, you never know where it's going to go. In some scenarios, I can see prioritizing and saying, it's not that we're focusing on this right now, but opening up more and more, and just trying to help others out, that could be paying dividends in the future too. And it's especially rewarding if you don't go into those thinking about what can I get out of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely a big reason why I kind of started to want to do this podcast, because I was having a lot of those types of meetings with founders, and really it like selfishly just kind of enjoying the conversation and learning a bunch and connecting. And then at some point I just thought, I might as well record these, and there probably are other people out there who would just maybe find them interesting or entertaining, or people who are also building things might kind of immediately look to go, oh, the person who Dan talked to, they might be a partner, or they're at the same stage that kind of we're at, and maybe we can like share some notes based on something that kind of came up in the conversation. So I haven't been doing it that long. It's still pretty new to me, but I've already been seeing tons of that, just like, kind of the ripple effect of stuff you can't predict. So, Michael, I really appreciate for that reason and a bunch of others, you sitting down and chatting. Super interesting, everything you're building. I think when I reached out, I said, I come from kind of an advertising background, and just from what I could see, looked like a really cool thing that you're building. And I'd love to stay in touch and kind of follow along the journey. And I think both of us being kind of in the famtech.org kind of community, that'll probably happen pretty easily. But I really appreciate it, and definitely let's stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks for your time. This was a great practice too. I'm not usually a guest on a podcast, so I can check that off the bucket list, and hopefully this is just one of many. So thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yep. And anything I do to help kind of along the way, feel free to reach out, and maybe we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.